Hey guys, it's Mitch. How's it going? We've gotten through about half of the Image X Month books. I figured it was about time to catch up to another one. So we're going to take a look today at Rob Liefeld's Shadowhawk #0. So just before we do, if you enjoyed the channel, if you feel like you might want to help out a little bit, go subscribe on my Patreon. It gives you early access to everything I do, helps out the channel, and helps to buy new comics. So we've already taken a look at Youngblood #9, which was by Jim Valentino, which was okay. Didn't look great. Particularly if you're a Youngblood fan and you want some sort of high firepower, extreme looking comic. You're not going to get any of that by Jim Valentino. What we got instead was a bit of a story, that was kind of fun. It was done in a cartoony way, which kind of fits for Jim Valentino. It fits him better than this extreme backbreaky guy that he usually does. But theoretically, at least, extreme backbreaky guy should be right up Rob Liefeld's alley, right? And normally I might agree with you. For some reason, though, Rob has decided to adopt the Jim Lee faux Frank Miller treatment for his art in this one. And in this one alone, I don't believe he's ever tried this since. And I don't think he really does it successfully. Well, we'll take a look through it and I'll show you what I mean. So let's start with the cover here. It's a little bit standard. The pose is different from what we usually see from Rob. It's standard in that it's, a one shot of one guy with no background, basically. But you can already see what he's planning on doing in that he's kind of mocked out a bunch of stretchies and veins over the existing shadows. And he's kind of thrown out a whole bunch of holding lines. Not all of them. I think this is going to be inked by Rob as well. This is kind of sloppy work, but that kind of lines up with what Rob usually does. I think he would have to ink himself in this case, though. Yeah, so this is kind of what we're going to get, although I think this is the best version of it on the cover here. I think it gets sloppier as we go. And it's a different take. Apparently, his Shadowhawk weighs about 350 pounds of pure muscle. And we can see from the credit here, this is by Liefeld and Kiko. And the Kiko credit here is going to loom large, I think. Kiko has to pick up a whole bunch of slack, because Rob is trying not to do cross-hatching in this. So let's take a look inside. All right. There are some odd credits here. So story and artist, Rob Liefeld. Layouts, Carl Alstetter. And then script by Robert Napton. So Carl Alstetter and Robert Napton are the usual Bloodstrike guys at this point. And I mean, Bloodstrike is in this comic for some reason. I mean, probably similarly to how in Savage Dragon, Grifter was there for some reason, right? I'm not sure why exactly Carl Alstetter would be doing the layouts, though. I mean, you'd think Rob would do that himself, unless he just really doesn't want to do it. Like, he doesn't feel like he has the time, or, he feels like he has too many important things. I need somebody to work it out for me so I can just scribble over it, and then have Kiko figure out what to do from there. And we got to make sure we get all our creator credits in here. So, Shadowhawk by Jim Valentino, Bloodstrike by Rob Liefeld, Mars Gunther and Mist by Carl Alstetter and Robert Napton. And then everybody else in here. I know, these credits seem odd. Maybe just because it's a Shadowline book, and we haven't done a lot of Shadowline recently. Okay, so we're going to start things off. So this is a Rob Liefeld story. It's going to be a one-shot, which isn't too surprising. Everything we've seen up until now has been one-shots. Cyberforce by McFarlane, Savage Dragon by Jim Lee, and Youngblood by Jim Valentino. That said, at least those guys tried to come up with something to happen in the pages. When Rob Liefeld has to do a one-shot, you kind of know exactly what you're going to get. A strike team is going to launch a mission on an installation, and they're going to beat up a whole bunch of nobodies. And then at the end of it, there'll be a big nobody who gets an extra hit or two in before the hero beats them up. And we'll get a little bit of backstory sprinkled in there. Sorry if I just spoiled this whole video. That's exactly what we're going to get here. So, yeah, okay. Some Quinjet-looking ship is coming in on Castle Brunik, and Shadowhawk is on board with Mist and Bloodstrike. And we can see from the inking that this is going to be done extremely sloppily. Rob isn't using white media. He's not masking. He's not doing anything other than putting down a pretty sloppy pencil job and then approximating it all with a brush. And you might be like, yeah, no, that's how you do that stuff. No, it isn't. I've tried that style myself. It takes a lot of careful planning. You see what Jim Lee and Frank Miller have done with this style. That's the kind of thing that takes a whole lot of thought. There's a reason that Jim Lee only did it for like 3 or 4 issues. While it looks extremely interesting, it can be extremely labor-intensive to try and come up with a good version. Or you can just do the Liefeld version and slap everything together. Vertical double-page splash to take up space. You see how little he's putting in on everything. And then getting Kiko to fill in tones. So, which kind of negates the purpose of the no holding lines, no hatching business. The whole deal with this style is supposed to be maximum contrast. Otherwise, it's just, it just looks weird and you're doing wavy lines all over everything. Like, it just gave him a reason to draw a woman's face while putting, less work into the construction and the rendering. Same with, like, her leaping out here. This is a standard Liefeld pose. And you can see how sloppy the ink is, like how blotchy it is. Because he's trying to, like, waver in and out from the holding lines. And then the big close-up on Shadowhawk at the bottom here, who looks either like he's, got the mask on or a mouthful of gigantic black teeth. It's an interesting mix, at least. As he yells, "Let's do it," because what do? They're going to jump down into the installation and beat up the nobodies. I'm trying to think off the top of my head how many times Liefeld has done this exact sequence of events. I mean, this was X-Force #1. This was the flip side of Youngblood #1. It was Youngblood #4. I'm pretty sure it was Youngblood #8 as well. Not to mention the Youngblood Strike File Die Hard stuff. And that's just, like I said, off the top of my head. I haven't read a whole bunch of stuff that Liefeld has done since. I don't know what he's been doing with Deadpool in the last few years. There's the stuff he was doing with Bloodstrike. There's Major X. I feel like it's all probably pretty similar. Like, at some point, you think he'd get bored and, like, either learn how to write or hire a writer. But he never seems to quite do that. So, while he's jumping down, Shadowhawk flashes back to how he got into this mess, because that's generally how we do this thing. So he had broken into a different installation, searching for the cure to AIDS, because, of course, it's 1994, and Shadowhawk also has AIDS. I remember when they did the whole, revealing that Shadowhawk was HIV positive thing back in the 90s. And it felt a little distasteful back then. It still does now, not nearly as much as having Rob's characters constantly searching for the cure to AIDS. I don't know, there's the implication that one of them would find it. And then people, I guess, get to read about how in the Extreme universe, AIDS is no big deal because there's a cure running around, right? Meanwhile, it's 1994 and people are still terrified of AIDS. It's just, like, all distasteful. Anyway, Shadowhawk goes rifling through files and he gets knocked out, he gets tranquilized by a dude who looks an awful lot like Marv. And so he's captured Shadowhawk because he's going to need him for a job. And this is a special job for an HIV-infected operative, which I can't imagine how that would be beneficial in any way. And if Shadowhawk completes the work for Not Marv, then Not Marv will potentially give him the cure to AIDS. Like, this whole comic is just wrong-headed. I don't mind the folds he's getting out of here, though. Although he did them the wrong way on the sleeve. You get the feeling like Rob really doesn't understand how folds work at all. Like, a lot of the time, personally, I get how the folds work. I just can't get my brain to translate it into ink on paper. It feels like Rob just doesn't get how they work, though. So now we're back in, I guess, theoretically real time, where Shadowhawk says, "Let's get down to fighting." And that's what he do by leaping in and punching the even less intricately designed putties than usual. These are just nameless dudes with wrinkles all over their suits and giant searchlights for eyes. And I mean, you can tell he's just not trying to figure out anything. Like, these shapes are all weird. Like, particularly for Liefeld, he usually has a pretty set kind of anatomy that he goes for, but he's just drawing the outlines, I think, and then filling them in. And what happens is, like, the anatomy gets even more messed up than usual. Like, what the hell is this arm doing? It's growing out of his shoulder blade. Like, I get what he's doing. He's trying to, like, swing it back and everything, but it doesn't look like that's what's happening. Shadowhawk looks even more bulbous than he normally would. because he's not trying to draw a bicep and then a tricep on top of it and then all the connecting muscles, all that kind of thing. He's just drawing a giant tube for an arm and then assuming that he'll figure out shadows in the middle here. Some of the shadow stuff he's got going on down here is kind of fun and interesting. But again, he's not figuring it out in advance. He's just drawing the shapes and then kind of going around it. Like, look at this. This is just a scribble for these the straps here around the legs. Anyway, what he's trying to do, they're breaking into some place where they have a delivery system for the AIDS virus. It's all coming back to the AIDS virus all the time. It's just really uncomfortable. Throw some shurikens, which must have just looked like nothing on the black and white page. Like, just outlines. This is the thing. If you're doing a real Frank Miller-esque, no holding lines kind of thing, you do all the backgrounds black. Or, you know, some kind of design or something for the shurikens to cross over. And then you figure out where your guy fits into that. You can have all this be black as well, only you figure out a couple of folds to kind of indicate where a leg would be. And having this be mostly black works, because then you have the shadow underneath the arm here set against it. Like, you can still show the whole guy, but just not doing black backgrounds by itself shows how little Rob is thinking about this. And then, yeah, Kiko has to come in and try to make it look like something, so sets it against a colorful background of some kind, where apparently fireworks are going off behind Shadowhawk here, and then decides that's not enough, so he also has to do swirlies on the shuriken themselves. Kind of an interesting face that he's got going down here, and I wouldn't mind seeing it in the black and white. In this case, it feels like Kiko's actually kind of getting in the way a little bit. And then, like, this shot here is just not trying at all. Drew the head, drew most of a fist, and then drew, like, the shapes connecting it up. Look at this shit. There is no attempt at musculature in here. Like, there's no effort put into this. This is the thing. Like, the Jim Valentino Youngblood wasn't really what probably any Youngblood reader would have wanted. But Jim tried at least. He came up with an interesting little story. It was kind of fun. Rob said, yo, that's so cool. I'm going to do one for you now. And he put no effort into it. He didn't try to come up with any kind of story whatsoever. And he spent like half the amount of time on the art that he normally would. Oh, look, it's another vertical double page plus. And look at how crappy any of this artwork is. This is like insulting to think that like this is something that people would want. Like, look at this. There's no detail. We just get the undershadows here. Like, you can come up with some like mech bits here and there. It doesn't fit into this style that he's trying, so maybe he shouldn't have put this kind of mech thing in there anyway. And like, these figures down here are just awful. I assume this is some kind of catch-up page where he's trying to make up for lost time of some kind. Because he just does like the basic shadow for what I assume is a sword, and then scribbles in black around it and puts like just the lines for the casing. This is awful. This head here, awful. No underdrawing under it. I don't even know if he penciled this. This, at least there's a little bit going on with like the folds under the mask and the neck stretchies and everything. That looks like, you know, a little bit of something. But and then this, yeah, this ruins the whole goddamn spread. This one's a little bit better. Like, at least this shot of Shadowhawk looks like a slight improvement. But again, this mech doesn't fit in with this style. It's just giving Rob excuses to draw less on a guy. And I mean, he already doesn't like to draw giant robots. He just uses them because they're easy. And like, how big is this fucking robot if Bloodstrike here is in front of the fist? This thing's got to be like 50 feet tall at least. It didn't really look like that. That looks more like 20. But he's just not, he's not even paying attention to what he's drawing anymore. And I mean, Wathum, which I think indicates that they blew it up. Yeah, I think this is Shadowhawk putting some kind of bomb or something on its back. And then I suppose, yeah, it explodes. So they won. It took 1 page extra than usual. Again, slightly okay with this pose here, but doesn't bother to figure out anything with the foreshortening on the arm here. He's usually got like a little bit of competence, to make, well, that might be pushing it, but like he's got some kind of formula that he sticks to. It's just, he's not bothering with this. It's all just the general shape and then, I don't know, fucking scribble inside it for a little bit. And here we got a pullout of Shadow Bart by Matt Groening. It's weird to look at like early 90s Simpsons stuff when they were like still kind of, well, I guess they were pretty much at the peak of their popularity at that point. So now they get to the containment unit where there's 2 guards standing around it, which Shadowhawk quickly gets rid of with the shuriken. This is kind of a fun shot. It's just, again, I wish there was a bit more detail in here. And what the hell is Shadowhawk standing on here? This doesn't work at all. Unless there's, like, plywood set up, like, 30 feet over this containment unit here. Maybe that's down to the colorist. Okay, so now Shadowhawk rappels down to pick up the solution that is the more effective method of delivering AIDS. So this is the reason why they needed somebody who is already HIV positive, so that if he fucks up removing the serum, it won't matter because he's already got it. That's some logic right there. I love shit like this where he doesn't even try to line up where the test tube is in his hand. This stuff here, I'm pretty sure Kiko just drew all this. You think about what would have been on the actual page here, and it's pretty much just this figure and this face. He just takes every opportunity to do as little work as possible. And I want to say that would be fine on his own book. I don't think it is, because he's still charging money and people are still paying for it. But it's a bit more excusable, because then, at least then you know what you're getting. If you keep buying every issue, you know you're getting a minimal effort. But when you're kind of doing a favor to a buddy, or even worse, like holding up your end of the bargain, because he produced a full comic that had a beginning, middle, and end, and had like effort put into it, and then this is what you give him back. What is he charging for this? I imagine this is still in the 275 days. Yeah, 275 Canadian. It's such a ripoff. The dude's a scam artist. And I mean, I feel like I've been harping on Rob too much recently, because I just got through the Extreme Sacrifice thing where it turned into like a salty rant. And then we did Youngblood Strikefile, where unfortunately got to compare Rob Liefeld stuff to Jay Lee's stuff, which, I mean, Rob's just never going to come out ahead on. And now this, I really didn't think about this. So if this feels like I'm piling on him, it wasn't really intentional. There wasn't some kind of design where I was like, okay, this is where I really put the boots to Rob. I don't feel like that's necessary. I feel like everybody knows what the pros and cons of Rob are, or at least what they think the pros and cons of Rob are. So you don't need me to fucking, like, just go on and on about it. But it just, if I'm going through the issue, like, I thought this would be just fun. Like, hey, let's do the one where Rob does the weird Frank Miller style. But actually, having read it now, it's just infuriating. So anyway, to diffusing the serum, some more guards come up and shoot him, and he's not supposed to spill it, or, well, here, as he says, somehow he holds onto the vial and avoids turning this place into the Chernobyl of HIV, which, oh my god. That's such a bad line. So I guess they've extracted it here. They set the charges. They're supposed to set charges now. And now they need to extract. So the big Quinjet thing comes in and picks them up, and they, I guess, swing away. There's so little effort going on here. Like, look at this crap. On the upside, at least Rob didn't feel like this was a viable style going forward. I think he got a few pages in and then just realized, like, oh shit, I should be putting more thought into this than what I'm actually doing. And he wasn't going to go back and redo the pages, because Rob doesn't do that. So he half-assed this already half-assed style. Like, these figures are just laughable. Same with this fucking ship, where he just made an outline and then put 2 dots for the afterburners. So they managed to make it out right as Kiko has to do an explosion purely out of color. This is some pretty weak sauce. There's elements in here that look like dry brush. I think it's just he runs out of ink mid-stroke and doesn't fix it. And then goes over it with some whiteout for the radiating shock. Like, look how fucking sloppy that is. So, all right, here at the end, he meets back up with this Gunther guy who was supposed to give him the cure. And instead, Gunther shoots him and knocks him out. And looks a fair bit less detailed than he did earlier on. Like, this wasn't great. But you look at this compared to how much detail there is later, and it's just like, man, I'm not even going to pretend to try anymore. And then Shadowhawk wakes up later on a rooftop that looks like it was done with actual finger paint. And Gunther shows up as a holographic projection, and apparently the doctor that was running the installation that they blew up has the cure for AIDS. And so Gunther gives him the information that if he finds that doctor, he'll find the cure. So that's his trade-off for Shadowhawk not hunting him down and looking for vengeance. So that's what they're going to do now. And nothing really happened in that issue. All right, so from here, we get a little message from Jim. We haven't heard from Jim yet in this issue. It says, Rob and I go way back, introduced in the 80s by mutual friend Brian Murray. We hit it off from the moment we met. He, the eager young enthusiast, me, the travel-worn veteran. And I taught him comics' rich and glorious history. He showed me what new artists and new ideas he had to offer. And he goes on about how Rob was the one who brought him into Image, which is the case. Jim has talked about it in interviews, that when they were first starting up Image, Rob advocated to bring his buddy Jim in, partially because Jim had a history with self-publishing, but also because they could use him essentially as kind of a mascot. Like, look, if this guy with his non-marketable style can make hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars by selling a book with us, then anybody can come over and make hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars with us. So they were going to use Jim as their recruiting drive poster. And Jim's fully aware of it, and he's okay with it, because he made hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars doing Shadowhawk, where he never would have done that if he'd stayed with Marvel. So you got to give the guy some kudos, because at least he knows what the deal is. He's not bitter about it. He's not trying to pretend it's something it's not. He knows exactly what the deal is. At least he didn't try to scam anybody out of their money, because they knew what they were getting. Like, as soon as you saw that first Shadowhawk book, you knew what it was all going to be. And people kept buying Shadowhawk. Like, there's a bit of loyalty with the Shadowhawk product. Jim's been able to put out Shadowhawk books on and off for the last 30 years, really. So that's pretty cool. And we're going to pick up some Shadowhawk 3 soon, the third miniseries. And I think that's going to... Oh, I'd like to do some Tyrant someday. It's just impossible to get a copy of Tyrant #1, unfortunately. All right, so that's going to do it for Shadowhawk #0. That was terrible, in my opinion. Like, even now that we're back to the cover, look how much more he put into the cover versus the last few pages. Look at that shit. There is nothing to this versus this. Like, oh my God, it's so bad. And again, I mean, Jim talks up Rob in that post-address kind of thing, where he's saying, like, you know, this version of Shadowhawk that he's done is very interesting and cool. And I like the direction that he's going in. I don't know if that's the case. I kind of doubt it. But, I mean, Shadowhawk #0, I'm pretty sure made Jim some pretty fucking good money because Rob Liefeld was on it. This is the thing. I doubt anybody was willing to trade comics with Jim Valentino because they didn't want him drawing their stuff. Rob's okay to do it because, say what you want about the guy, Rob helps out his buddies. Even to the point where it probably shot him in the foot a little bit with sales on Youngblood #9. And I mean, maybe not. I don't know what the sales were. I think Rob could probably afford the loss. And I mean, the other guys could too. It's just, I don't think they would have wanted to. But then he goes back and he draws Shadowhawk #0. And even when he does a piss poor job, I'm sure this probably was one of the best selling issues of Shadowhawk that ever came out. So I don't know. It's kind of the endless conundrum with Rob Liefeld, because he talks a big game about his talent and about his marketability, really. And at least on the second part, he's right. It's tough to explain why. I don't know why anybody would pick this up after they'd seen a few pages of it. Although in 1994, I guess I have to wonder just how many people who bought it actually opened it up. Like, again, it strikes me as a scam. But if everybody who pays money for it is in on the scam, and it's just like, that's okay, we like the guy, does that make it better? I don't know. Anyway, that's going to do it for this one. If it feels like I've been going too hard at Liefeld recently, I kind of agree with you. This isn't exactly the point of the channel or anything. So next few weeks, we're going to lay off of Rob for a little while and just kind of get around to some other stuff. I feel like this is kind of a routine that I get into, where Rob's in the rotation regularly, and then it kind of ramps up a bit more than usual, and it's like, oh god, just like kind of leaves a bad taste in your mouth. So maybe we'll rail on Jim Lee for a little while after this. That always does well. Everybody's sick of Jim Lee. He doesn't have any supporters. But yeah, that's going to do it. So thanks very much for watching. If you like this video, please hit like, hit subscribe, hit the notification so you know when the next one's coming out. Go over and subscribe on my Patreon. It gives you early access to everything I do, from the Blood Force stuff to the YouTube videos before they get uploaded to YouTube, as well as some Patreon exclusive content. You can also follow me on Instagram and DM me there for commissions, and you can join the Blood Force Discord server. But yeah, that's going to do it. Thanks again for watching, guys. I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.